afraid of the dark.
Hello, my listener. Today I'm going to tell you about a case that has no explanation. Whether it is true or mystical or something else is left to your discretion. Share in the comments how you would explain what is happening. Make some tea or coffee. We're about to begin. I have a couple of friends, Marek and Anthony, with whom we've been friends since childhood. We met when we were around 15 to 16 years old, and now our friendship has been going on for 20 years. Anthony was 3 years older than us. He was around 18 to 19 at the time. We don't meet very often, especially all three of us together, but we stay in touch. Recently, we finally managed to get together at the same table. We reminisced about our childhood, our mischief, and funny incidents. But there's one incident in the history of our friendship that Anthony hates to remember, and we try not to bring it up either, although even after 20 years we still haven't found answers to what happened. Instead, we have more questions. It was at the dawn of our friendship, when we were young guys of 17 to 20 years old. We loved to gather in the evenings, sit, chat, play something. We often stayed overnight at each other's places and so on. Marek's parents had an apartment where tenants had recently moved in. It belonged to his grandparents then. When they died, the apartment was empty, and his parents decided to rent it out. That evening, Marek said that the tenants unexpectedly moved out. The new ones hadn't moved in yet, so let's go there, take some food, he'll bring Monopoly, and we'll play. Well, of course, we supported this proposal. Now, a small digression to describe the apartment, because this detail is important. There are 2 rooms, bedroom and living room, a kitchen, and one continuous long balcony from the kitchen through one room bedroom and into the second living room. There are 2 doors to the balcony, one from the kitchen, the other from the second room. We sat there until about 3 in the morning, played Monopoly, laughed at the loser, and then decided to go to sleep. Marek and I went to sleep in the bedroom, that is, in the middle room. Between the kitchen and the living room, there was a bed and a folding chair, and Anthony lay down on the sofa in the living room. The sofa stands literally in front of the balcony door. When lying with your head towards the entrance door, your feet are directed towards the balcony. We said goodnight, joked through the rooms for a couple of minutes, teasing each other, and then fell asleep. I woke up because Marek was nudging me in the side. Sleepy, I wanted to scold him, but I saw that he leaned over with a worried face and put his finger to his lips, indicating for me to be quiet. I sat up in bed and looked questioningly at him. It was almost dawn outside, but it was still quite dark in the apartment. Around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, I understood. Marek leaned towards me and whispered, "Sit quietly and listen." I froze and began to listen. At first I heard nothing, but then suddenly I heard Anthony's voice from the other room. He was saying something, but it was impossible to make out what exactly. I quietly said to Marek, "Well, if he's talking in his sleep, what's the big deal?" Marek made a gesture with his hand like wait, and whispered, "No, listen." We began to listen. It was impossible to make out what Anthony was saying, but from his intonation it was clear that he was addressing someone and asking something, at first in a drowsy mumble, then irritation crept into his voice. And after a couple of seconds we heard Anthony get up and take a few steps, continuing to ask something. "Sleepwalker?" I quietly asked, looking at Marek. "I don't know, but I don't feel right," he replied. "I've heard you shouldn't wake up sleepwalkers," I whispered. "Let's just go see what he's doing." We got up and quietly approached the living room door and then entered just as quietly. Anthony was standing in front of the balcony entrance, a couple of steps away from the drawn curtains, and was asking irritably, "What do you want from me? What's there?" He didn't look like a sleepwalker, because his voice was clearly not sleepy, and the movements of his hand, like gestures of indignation, were not like what sleepwalkers do. Then he took a step towards the curtain and reached out to open it, and the strangest thing happened. We noticed some movement behind the curtain, as if someone was standing there and also reaching out to his hand. "Anthony, what are you doing?" Merrick and I said almost simultaneously. Anthony turned around and suddenly jerked towards the curtain, as if he were being pulled by an outstretched hand. He screamed, pulled his hand, which was already halfway there, and jumped aside. With bewildered eyes, he looked at us and then at the balcony door behind the curtain. Merrick clicked the switch and turned on the light. Anthony stood pale in the middle of the room, as if he didn't understand anything. We took him and led him to the kitchen. Merrick put on the kettle. Anthony sat there in silence. We ourselves didn't quite understand what had happened, or if anything had happened at all. About 10 minutes later, we poured some tea and finally asked Anthony to tell us what had happened to him. He was starting to come to his senses and began to tell his story. Everyone went to bed. I lay down on the sofa with my feet towards the balcony and almost immediately fell asleep. Suddenly, through my sleep, I hear someone calling my name, Anthony. Anthony. Anthony, so quietly but clearly, and the voice seems like one of you, and at the same time, not sleepy. I don't understand. I raise my head, look at the door, no one in the room. Listen, maybe you're calling from the other room. No. And suddenly I hear it again, so insistently now, Anthony. Anthony, and I understand that they are calling me from the balcony. I look. The door is slightly ajar to the balcony, but don't come out from behind the curtain. I start asking, like, what do you want from me? What happened there? And in response again, Anthony. Anthony, and with such a summoning tone, like, come here at last, I'm calling you without getting up. I grumble, like, what do you want from me? What happened there on the balcony? But in response, they just keep calling my name again, so clearly, insistently, but without aggression, and the voice is such that, damn it, someone's from you, but not really. I get up, go to the curtain, already annoyed completely. Well, what do you want from me? What's going on there with you? And I reach out to pull back the curtain, and at this moment, when my fingers just touch the curtain, someone suddenly grabs my wrist and pulls my hand hard, trying to pull it in. And I feel that it's not a human hand, it's so thin, sinewy, with rough skin and fur. I jump aside, pull my hand away, and then you turn on the light. We sit in the kitchen for a couple of minutes, digesting what we saw and what Anthony told us. I say, it's already dawn. Let's go and see. Maybe you imagined it. Well, the door was slightly open, draft. You heard sleepy voices in a half sleep, and you thought you were grabbed. But Marek replies, there can't be a draft from the door slightly open. We insulated and sealed this door about 3 years ago. It doesn't even open. You can only enter the balcony from the kitchen. And at the other end of the balcony, we made a pantry, closed it off. There's no entrance from the room there. We didn't bother to check anything. We quickly gathered and left. After that, tenants started moving in, but no one stayed there for long. Eventually, Marek's parents got tired of constantly looking for someone to rent the apartment to and decided to sell it. So we never visited it again.